The unexpected task. The hum of machinery vibrated through the steel walls of the hangar, blending with the sporadic flickering of harsh industrial lights above. A chill permeated the air, thick with the scent of metal and ozone, like the very atmosphere was charged with the anticipation of something monumental. In the center of this vast, sterile space, a colossal cage stood, a perfect fusion of human ingenuity and alien technology. It was more than just a prison. It was a symbol of humanity's might, yet it contained a secret far too powerful and terrifying to remain locked away forever. The heavy doors of the containment area groaned shut behind Alan Cross as he entered. His boots clicked against the cold, metallic floor, echoing in the empty chamber. He was just a mechanic, one among many who served the fleet. He wasn't trained for this, repairing machines, reconfiguring systems, adjusting sensors. That was his job. But today, that task had taken an unimaginable turn. Today, he was tasked with something far more daunting. In the dim light of the hangar, something massive stirred. Alan's eyes adjusted to the shadows and locked on the creature at the heart of the cage. The dragon. It wasn't the kind of beast you'd find in old legends. This wasn't the fiery, noble creature of fantasy, nor the terror of ancient myth. No, this was something engineered, a weapon, a creature of pure power, designed to be the perfect predator. Its dark scales shimmered faintly as it moved, catching the light like shards of obsidian. Its wings, wide and leathery, stretched across the entire length of the cage. It was more than a creature. It was a machine, a biological weapon with an intelligence that sent a shiver down Alan's spine. The dragon's eyes glowed, a molten gold that burned through the shadows, watching him with a piercing awareness. It was no simple animal. This thing was alive in a way that humanity could barely comprehend. Alan gritted his teeth. He had no idea why he had been chosen for this task. He wasn't an expert in alien biology or arcane technologies. He was just a mechanic, a cog in a much larger machine. But the brass had made it clear. He was the one who would repair the cage. No one else. His fingers instinctively reached for the toolbox at his side, the familiar weight of it grounding him. Yet, as he looked up again, the dragon's molten eyes locked onto him, and the air seemed to thicken, heavy with an unseen force. Then, a voice. No, a thought. Rippled through the silence, a pulse of pure intent that he felt deep in his chest. You are the one they sent. The voice wasn't spoken, it was felt, deep and resonant, as if the dragon was speaking directly into Alan's mind. Alan's heart skipped a beat, his breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure if he had heard it, or if it was some kind of hallucination. Did you just speak? He asked aloud, his voice shaky, despite his best efforts to sound confident. The dragon's golden eyes flickered, almost amused. Not speak, human. Feel, it replied, its voice now a palpable sensation in the air around him. Your people are strange. They send a mechanic to do what should be a task for the best of them. Alan frowned. His mind raced as he bent down to open his toolbox, trying to focus on something, anything, other than the fact that he was speaking to a creature that defied all logic. This thing, this dragon, wasn't supposed to exist. It shouldn't even be real. Yet here it was, in front of him, fully aware, intelligent, and seemingly mocking his presence. Well, that's why they sent me, Alan said, trying to maintain a sense of control. I'm just here to make sure your cage stays intact. You're a danger to this station, so I'm fixing the stabilizers. Simple as that. The dragon let out a low, rumbling sound that Alan could feel in his bones. It wasn't laughter, but it had the same effect. It was as if the creature was laughing at him, testing him, challenging his every word. You think your cage can hold me? The dragon's voice hummed in his mind again, a dark amusement seeping into its tone. You do not know what you are dealing with, little human. I am no mere animal. I am the apex predator of 100 worlds. Your kind created me, yes, but you have underestimated me. Alan remained silent for a moment, his fingers tightening around the control panel he had pulled from his toolbox. The dragon's words lingered in the air, unsettling him in ways he didn't want to admit. He was just here to do his job. He couldn't get caught up in whatever games the creature was playing. "I don't need to know your history," Alan replied, voice steady, though his mind was racing. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to fix the systems. You're just a job, nothing more." The dragon's eyes flashed, glowing brighter for a brief moment. "Is that what you think? You are no mere mechanic. You are something else. You have been chosen, just like I have been chosen. And I see it in you, human. There is more to you than you realize, more than your people know." Alan felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine as he started connecting cables to the control panel. "You don't know anything about me," he muttered under his breath, unwilling to entertain the dragon's cryptic words. But the dragon's gaze never wavered. It studied him with a deep, unsettling curiosity. "Oh, but I do," it purred. "I can feel it. The hidden truth, buried deep inside of you. You are not what you seem. They sent you because they think you are expendable, yet I sense something unfinished within you. You are not like the others. You have a power that even you do not understand." Alan's hands froze mid-motion as the dragon's words cut through his mind like a blade. For a moment, he was unsure whether the creature was toying with him or if it knew something he didn't. The air grew thick with tension, and Alan forced himself to look away, focusing on the cables in his hands, trying to block out the dragon's unnerving presence. The moment was shattered by a sudden, loud alarm, blaring throughout the hangar. Red warning lights flashed across the walls, and a mechanical voice echoed through the intercom. "Containment breach detected in Sector 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat, all personnel evacuate immediately." Alan's heart raced as he quickly turned toward the control panel. The dragon's eyes gleamed with a wicked understanding. "It seems your time is running out, human," it said softly, as the warning bells continued to wail. "Let's see what you do when the real danger arrives." Alan's fingers flew over the interface, overriding the evacuation protocols. He wasn't leaving. He had a job to do. And if the dragon's cryptic words meant anything, he had to ensure that cage held, because if it didn't, everyone on the station would be dead. Unspoken truths. The alarm's blare was relentless, a harsh reminder that time was running out. Alan's heart pounded as he scrambled to override the station's evacuation protocols, his fingers a blur over the holographic control panel. The flashing red lights painted the walls in an ominous glow, casting long shadows over the hangar floor. Despite the chaos around him, Alan couldn't shake the weight of the dragon's piercing gaze. It felt like the creature was watching him, studying him in a way that went beyond mere curiosity. There was something deeper there, something hidden. "You should leave, human." The dragon's voice hummed in his mind, low and calm despite the rising tension. "You're not prepared for what's coming." Alan ignored it, his focus narrowing on the interface. The dragon's words, cryptic, taunting, kept gnawing at him. It had spoken of things Alan didn't understand, things about him that made his skin crawl. "I'm not here to listen to you," Alan muttered under his breath, frustration building as he typed furiously. "I'm here to do my job." But the dragon's voice only grew more insistent, a soft purr that resonated deep within Alan's chest. "You do not know what you are dealing with. This station, this cage, they are not your real enemies. You are trapped here just like me, human. But unlike you, I have nothing to lose." Alan froze, his hand hovering over the control panel. He was caught off guard by the dragon's words. "What do you mean?" he asked, despite himself. He hated how the creature's voice seemed to pull at him, like a whisper at the edge of his mind. The dragon's golden eyes flashed, its gaze turning colder, sharper. "You are more than a mechanic. You are not one of them, are you? You know it. Deep down, you've always known you are different." Alan's stomach twisted. He could feel the dragon's words burrowing into his thoughts, but he forced himself to stay composed. "I don't have time for this," he said, his voice tight. "I'm trying to keep this station from falling apart. You're the one who's been wreaking havoc, not me." The dragon's chuckle reverberated through the hangar, a low, mocking sound. "You believe you are in control of this situation, but you are mistaken, human. Your precious station is built on lies, and those who created me, they are the true threat." The words hung in the air, heavy with an unsettling truth. Alan didn't know what to think. The station was humanity's pride, a pinnacle of their achievements. But something about the dragon's words rang true. Something was off. And the more Alan listened, the more the cracks in his understanding of this entire mission widened. "You're just a tool to them," the dragon continued, its voice now a dark murmur, as though it had all the time in the world to unravel Alan's thoughts. "You believe they care about you, that they sent you here to do a job. But that is not the case. They sent you because you are disposable. No one believes in you, Alan Cross. Not truly." Alan's fingers tightened around the control panel, his breath quickening. The dragon's voice was like a constant presence in his mind, weaving around him, pulling at threads of doubt. But he couldn't let it get to him. He couldn't afford to. If he allowed himself to lose focus, if he let the dragon's words cloud his judgment, everyone on the station would die. "I'm not like you," Alan said, his voice hard as stone. "I don't need to believe in their lies. I just need to keep this station intact." The dragon tilted its massive head, its golden eyes narrowing with a quiet understanding. "You think you're alone in this, but you're not. You and I are both victims of their arrogance. They created us both for different purposes, but they did not account for what we would become. And now you are trapped in the same web as I. Do you see that yet?" Alan's chest tightened, his mind racing. There was something about the dragon's words that dug into his soul, something raw and truthful about the nature of the humans he served. He wasn't just repairing a containment field. He was facing a creature that, like him, had been shaped by forces beyond its control. And now, that same creature was trying to tell him something he couldn't fully grasp. The warning alarm screamed louder, pulling Alan back to the present. He couldn't afford to stand here pondering the nature of his existence. His job was to stop the containment breach, not philosophize with the dragon. "Enough," Alan snapped, his voice rising as he pushed the thought aside. He couldn't let this creature play games with him. "I don't care what you think. I'm doing this, and I'll finish it." The dragon's gaze softened, just for a moment, before its voice slithered through his mind once again. "You will never finish it, human, because the real danger isn't me. It's the truth you are too afraid to face." Before Alan could respond, the entire station shuddered beneath his feet. The lights above him flickered violently, and the walls groaned, as though the station itself were alive and in pain. The emergency lights kicked on, casting everything in a crimson glow. Alan's heart skipped a beat as he realized something worse was happening. "Containment breach in Sector 7. The mechanical voice blared again, this time with more urgency. "All personnel report immediately to evacuation zones. Repeat, all personnel report immediately." The ground beneath Alan's feet shook violently, and a deep rumble filled the air. His mind raced. This wasn't a drill. This was real. He glanced up at the dragon, who was watching him intently. Its eyes gleamed with an unsettling combination of curiosity and amusement. The dragon didn't move, not an inch, as if it were waiting for something. Alan couldn't help but wonder. Was it waiting for him to make a choice? Was this part of the creature's game? "Get ready," the dragon said quietly, its voice a soft whisper that Alan could feel reverberate in his bones. "This is only the beginning." Alan swallowed hard, turning back to the control panel. The countdown for the station's imminent destruction had begun. He didn't have time to listen to the creature anymore. The dragon was right about one thing, though. This wasn't just about a simple repair anymore. This was about survival. And survival meant he had to fix everything before it all collapsed. But as the alarms blared louder, Alan couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was unfolding, something that he might not survive. The dragon's words echoed in his mind. "You will never finish it, human." And as the hangar trembled again, Alan knew it was only a matter of time before he discovered just how right the dragon truly was. The unraveling truth. The station trembled once more, sending a shudder through the floor beneath Alan's feet. The overhead lights flickered erratically, casting the hangar in a chaotic mix of shadows and harsh red emergency lighting. Every nerve in his body was on edge as the blaring sirens seemed to grow louder, a constant reminder that time was running out. The dragon's words echoed in his mind, a steady hum that refused to be ignored. "You will never finish it, human." The warning had been clear. The stakes were higher than just a containment breach. The dragon's cryptic message lingered, gnawing at him. Alan fought to focus. He wasn't here to be distracted. The station's containment systems were on the verge of failing, and if he didn't fix the stabilizers, everyone on board would be in jeopardy. The dragon's taunts, its subtle manipulations of his thoughts, were just noise. He had a job to do. He reached for the control panel again, his hand steady despite the pressure mounting in his chest. His fingers danced across the interface, trying to keep the systems from spiraling into failure. Each keystroke felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the entire station's future rested on his shoulders. He was alone in this, alone with the dragon, alone with the failure of the station's technology. But then, as if the creature could sense his growing frustration, a low chuckle rippled through the air, vibrating in Alan's bones. "You really think you can fix this, don't you?" The dragon's voice wasn't a whisper now, but a tangible force, pressing against Alan's thoughts. It made him feel small, insignificant. "The systems are already broken. Even if you fix them, the station will collapse. You are just a cog in a machine built by those who do not understand their own creation." Alan clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to respond. He didn't want to give the dragon the satisfaction of seeing him rattle. The dragon was right about one thing, though. The systems were failing. But Alan wasn't about to let that be the end of it. He couldn't afford to be distracted by some creature that had been born out of human arrogance. The dragon was dangerous, but so was the station's reactor if the energy grid failed completely. "Focus. Fix the grid." But then the dragon's voice grew louder in his mind, more insistent, its presence like a shadow that stretched over him. "You do not know the truth, human. The station's failure is only the beginning. You think you're saving them, but you are not. The truth is that they built you, they built me, and they will destroy us both when we are no longer useful. They will burn this place to the ground before they allow the truth to escape." Alan's hands froze above the control panel. For a moment, the thought of the dragon's words lingered, like a cold hand on his chest. What truth? He shook his head, trying to rid himself of the thoughts. He couldn't afford to get distracted now. The reactor was still stabilizing, but it wouldn't hold for long. There was too much damage. "Enough," Alan growled, swiping his hand across the control interface to restart the diagnostic sequence. He needed to refocus. He couldn't let this creature get to him. "You don't even know why you're here, do you?" The dragon's voice echoed through the hangar, its tone shifting, becoming almost sad. "You think you are here by chance, that you are just a mechanic sent to fix a broken machine. But you are here because they made sure you would be. They want you to see what happens when a machine is broken, when a creation becomes uncontrollable." Alan shook his head, gritting his teeth. The words were starting to blur together, a constant hum of unease that was distracting him. He could feel the dragon's intelligence gnawing at him, attempting to break through his resolve. There was something in its tone now, a knowing, almost pitying edge that made him uneasy. He wasn't just fighting a machine. He was fighting against something that knew him in ways he wasn't ready to acknowledge. "What are you talking about?" Alan asked, his voice a low whisper, but the question burned through him like fire. He had to know. What did the dragon mean? The dragon's golden eyes glinted, watching him carefully. "I am a product of human ambition," it said softly, its voice almost too calm now. "I was created to be the perfect weapon, an apex predator, designed to conquer and destroy. But my creators did not account for one thing: intelligence. They underestimated what we could become." Alan felt the words settle deep within him, more unsettling than any physical threat. It wasn't just the dragon that had been created, it was the entire system. The more Alan thought about it, the more the pieces fell into place. This was a warship, a station built for more than just observation and containment. It was a weapon, designed to house something far worse than the dragon, a force that might destroy everything in its path. "And what about me?" Alan asked, barely hearing his own voice. "What do you mean when you say they made sure I would be here?" The dragon tilted its head, its golden eyes narrowing. "You are one of their creations too. You think you were chosen at random, but you were not. You were picked because they knew you would never leave. They planted you here, knowing that you would fix what they created. They've been watching you, just like they watch me." The words hit Alan like a punch to the gut. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't. He had always considered himself ordinary, just a mechanic doing his job, fixing things, making things work. But what if the dragon was right? What if this was all part of a bigger plan, something he hadn't been aware of? He shook his head, trying to clear the thoughts. Focus. Finish the job. The alarms blared again, louder this time. Alan's eyes snapped back to the control panel, where warning after warning flashed in rapid succession. The stabilizers were failing faster than he could repair them. He could feel the dragon's presence, its dark intelligence watching him, waiting for him to face the truth. But as the hangar trembled again, this time with an intensity that nearly knocked him off his feet, Alan knew the truth didn't matter anymore. There wasn't time to question the nature of his existence or the dragon's words. The station was breaking apart. And in that moment, Alan made a choice. He wasn't going to be a puppet. He wasn't going to be a tool for anyone's plans. He was going to save this station, no matter what it took. The turning point. The station groaned under the weight of its own failure, the deep vibrations of metal and machinery shaking the walls with each passing second. The alarms were deafening, a relentless reminder that the chaos was no longer a distant threat. It was here, now, and Alan had no choice but to face it. The dragon's voice, soft and constant in his mind, was no longer just a distraction. It was an undeniable presence, a thread weaving through his thoughts, pushing him to question everything he knew. "You will fail, human," the dragon whispered again, its words like a cold wind brushing against his skin. "This place was never meant to survive, and neither were you." Alan clenched his jaw, refusing to let the creature's words sink in. He had no time for this. The reactor was unstable, and the station's systems were failing at an alarming rate. He could feel the hum of the energy grid faltering beneath his fingertips as he worked furiously to stabilize the containment field. But no matter how fast he moved, the damage was spreading. He could hear the groan of metal straining, the shudder of the station's frame as it struggled to hold together. The dragon wasn't wrong. This place was a ticking time bomb, and Alan had no idea how long it would hold. "You've been here before, haven't you?" The dragon's voice took on a different tone, almost pensive. "You've always been at the edge of something breaking, something bigger than you. You've always been waiting for the inevitable collapse." Alan paused, fingers hovering over the control panel as the dragon's words pierced through his thoughts. "Shut up." He couldn't listen. He couldn't afford to let the creature manipulate him. But deep down, the dragon was right. He'd always felt like he was standing at the precipice of something huge, something destructive, but he'd never realized just how deep it went. His fingers moved again, the cool metal of the control panel familiar and grounding, but the weight of the dragon's words lingered like a storm cloud above his head. "You are not here by accident." Alan Cross. The dragon continued. They chose you because you are just like me. A creation, a weapon. And when the time comes, they will discard you, just like they have discarded me. Alan's heart raced as he tried to focus, desperately trying to ignore the growing sense of dread building in his chest. The stabilizers weren't responding. The grid was failing, and the dragon's words were starting to feel too true. He had always been just a mechanic, someone who fixed things. But the dragon had seen something in him, a hidden truth, a power that neither of them could escape. What if you were meant for something more? The dragon's voice softened, as if it were trying to reach him, to draw him into something far larger than he was willing to admit. What if you were never meant to just fix things, Alan? What if you were meant to break them? Alan's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he froze, his mind racing as the station continued to shake around him. The walls creaked and groaned, and the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air like a warning. The dragon's words echoed in his mind, louder now, impossible to ignore. You are a part of this station. You were made to fix what is broken, just like I was made to destroy what was once whole. The air grew thicker with each passing moment. Alan's thoughts were no longer just about the task at hand. The dragon was right. There was something off about all of this. The more he thought about it, the more the truth began to reveal itself, piece by piece. He wasn't just a mechanic sent to repair a broken machine. He was a cog in a much larger, far more dangerous machine. The station, the dragon, even himself. It was all part of a system designed to fail, a system that was meant to bring about destruction, not preservation. A harsh blast of heat from the dragon's body cut through the tension in the air, snapping Alan out of his thoughts. The creature's golden eyes were locked onto him, filled with something that resembled pity, or maybe it was something more dangerous. The dragon wasn't just observing him anymore. It was waiting for something. What are you waiting for? Alan's voice trembled as he spoke, the uncertainty creeping into his words. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? The dragon's lips curled into a cruel smile, its sharp teeth glinting in the flickering light. I want nothing from you, human. I want you to understand what you really are. Alan's heart pounded in his chest as the dragon's words took root, filling him with a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He had always been a part of something larger than himself, but now he couldn't ignore the truth. He was just as much a creation as the dragon. He had been chosen for this task for a reason. But what was that reason? And what would happen when the truth was fully revealed? You are the one who will bring about the end, Alan Cross. You and this station. You were meant to be the key. The station rumbled again, louder now, shaking the very foundation of the hangar. Alan's hands gripped the control panel, his knuckles white, as he tried to force the systems back online. But the damage was too great. He could feel it in his bones. The inevitable collapse was coming, whether he was ready for it or not. And just as the dragon had predicted, the system reached its breaking point. A final, deafening screech of metal echoed through the hangar, and for the briefest moment, everything went silent. Then the lights cut out. The station was plunging into darkness. Alan's breath came in ragged gasps as the world around him began to disintegrate, each piece of the station crumbling like sand slipping through his fingers. The dragon's voice, soft and full of something that might have been satisfaction, filled his mind once more. This is the beginning, human. You can no longer ignore what you have become. The darkness surrounded him, and Alan finally understood. He wasn't just repairing a broken machine. He was part of it. And now, it was time for the truth to unravel. The weight of choice. The darkness was suffocating, thicker than any shadow Alan had ever encountered. The hum of the station had fallen silent, replaced by a deep, unsettling stillness that seemed to press against him from all sides. He blinked, his eyes straining in the pitch-black void. The emergency lights were out, and the blinking red warnings had vanished from the control panel. There was only the low, metallic groan of the station's skeletal frame as it shuddered with every passing second. Alan's mind raced. He had no idea how much time had passed since the lights went out, but he could feel the station's heart beating slower with each tremor. The dragon's words echoed through the stillness like a cruel mantra. "You are the key, Alan Cross. You cannot escape what you were meant to do." They swirled around him, impossible to ignore, just like the heavy silence that had settled over everything. The dragon's voice, despite the darkness, felt closer now, as if the creature was right beside him, its presence vibrating in the very air. "You were never meant to just repair the systems. You were meant to destroy them." Alan's chest tightened. He had never believed in destiny or fate, never bought into the idea that his life had some greater purpose dictated by forces outside of his control. But standing in the midst of this collapsing station, hearing the dragon's voice reverberating through his thoughts, he couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was truth in its words. "What do you mean?" Alan's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper in the cold, empty space. He wasn't even sure if he was speaking to the dragon anymore, or if he was just trying to make sense of his own spiraling thoughts. The dragon's response came as a pulse, sharp and heavy, like an electrical current flowing through the room. "You were always meant to be more than this. The station, the systems, they were designed to fail. You think they were created for peace, for protection, but they were always a weapon. And you are the mechanism that will bring it all crashing down." Alan's head spun. He felt the weight of the dragon's words settle like an anchor around his chest. He was part of this, part of a grand design that he hadn't chosen. He hadn't asked for this, had never wanted to be a pawn in a game that he didn't understand. But the more he listened, the more the pieces seemed to fit together, as though everything, his life, his role on this station, the very systems he was trying to repair, was leading him to this moment. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He wasn't just here to fix things. You were born to destroy. The dragon's voice was almost tender now, like it was trying to comfort him, or maybe coax him toward a truth that had been hidden from him all his life. Your kind did not just build this station. They built you too, Alan Cross. You are part of this creation, and when the time comes, you will be the one to turn the key, to release everything. You are the one who will bring down the walls, the barriers, the cages. It is your purpose. The words hit him like a wave, crashing over him with a force that left him breathless. He wasn't ready for this. He couldn't be. How could he reconcile what the dragon was saying with the life he had known? He had always been the fixer, the one who put things back together. Now he was being told that he was meant to break it all apart. He was meant to be the one who triggered the destruction. "No," Alan whispered to himself. "That's not who I am." But even as he said the words, doubt crept in. The station was falling apart. The reactor was on the verge of meltdown. The very walls of the hangar were shaking. It wasn't just a breach anymore. It was the collapse of everything he had ever known. And if the dragon was right, if everything had been built to fail from the beginning, then maybe this was the end. The end of the station, the end of the mission, the end of everything. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something else. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the voice, trying to steady himself in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. He had to focus. The dragon was playing games with his mind, twisting his thoughts, but there was something real happening here. The reactor was moments from going critical. He couldn't afford to lose himself in these revelations, no matter how twisted they seemed. If the station failed, they would all die. He couldn't let that happen. "You are the only one who can stop this, Alan." The dragon's voice was insistent now, almost pleading. It was like it had tapped into some part of him, some dark corner of his mind he didn't even know existed. The dragon had sensed his fear, his doubt. And in that moment, Alan felt it, his own power buried deep inside. He wasn't just a mechanic. He wasn't just a cog in the machine. He was the catalyst. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the station, shaking the walls once more. The dragon's voice swelled in his mind, louder than before. There is no turning back now. The path has already been set. You are not the man you thought you were, Alan Cross. You are something far more dangerous. Alan's breath came faster as the weight of the dragon's words hit him once more. The pieces were falling into place. The station, the technology, the mission. It was all a carefully orchestrated trap. A plan to ensure that the power they had created would be destroyed, dismantled from the inside. But the question still lingered. Was he ready to make that choice? Was he prepared to embrace the destruction that was now within his reach? A loud crack split the air as something inside the station finally gave way. Alan's eyes snapped open, and for the first time, he truly understood. He wasn't here just to repair things. He was here to bring everything down. The station was crumbling, and he, whether he liked it or not, was the one who would tear it apart. With that realization, the walls of the hangar seemed to close in around him. The weight of his decision was suffocating, but there was no going back. The dragon's influence had reached deep inside him, and now it was up to Alan whether to embrace his destiny or to fight it and risk everything. The clock was ticking, and Alan Cross had to make the hardest decision of his life. Would he destroy what he had been brought here to protect, or would he defy the very system that had created him? The catalyst. The air in the hangar was thick with tension, the metallic scent of overheating systems mixing with the faint, acrid smell of burning wiring. Alan's chest heaved as he stood frozen in place, staring at the flickering control panel before him. Every second that passed seemed to stretch out infinitely, as if time itself had warped under the pressure of his decision. The dragon's voice, deep, rich with ancient knowledge and bitter wisdom, continued to reverberate in his mind, like the distant rumble of thunder before a storm. You are the key, Alan Cross. You always have been. The dragon's words were no longer just an unsettling hum in the background of his thoughts. They had become the pulse of his every moment, beating in sync with the erratic rhythms of the station's failing systems. The more Alan tried to focus, the clearer the truth became. The creature had a hold over him, a power that went beyond its presence in the cage. It knew something he didn't, something buried deep within him that he had been too blind, or too afraid, to see. You think you can still fix this, but the truth is, you were always meant to break it. His fingers hovered over the panel, then pulled back. His thoughts raced, trapped in a whirlwind of contradictions. He had always believed in fixing things, repairing the broken, making the shattered whole again. But now, everything he knew was being torn apart. The station was falling apart. His role had changed. The mission had changed. The red emergency lights blinked like a heartbeat, casting an ominous glow over the hangar. The distant rumble of a failing reactor echoed through the walls, reminding him that the collapse wasn't an option. It was inevitable. You will be the one to release it, the one to destroy it all. Alan clenched his jaw and exhaled sharply. He had to do something. The dragon had forced him into this position, twisted his very sense of self. The dragon saw the cracks in his identity, the places where fear and doubt had taken root. But that wasn't all he saw. It had seen something else, something buried deep inside Alan, something he wasn't ready to face. You are not just a mechanic, Alan. You are the architect of destruction. They made you to be the final piece in their experiment. The words seared through his mind. Could it be true? Could he really be a part of this grand destructive design? No, he wouldn't accept that. He wasn't a pawn. He wasn't some tool for a greater plan. He was Alan Cross, a man with his own will, his own choices. His breath quickened as he pushed back the creeping sense of doubt. He had made a decision. He was going to save this station, no matter what. The dragon's influence, its insidious voice in his mind, couldn't change that. But even as the thought solidified in his mind, he felt something shift inside him. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but as his hand hovered over the interface again, he realized what it was. The urge to let go. The urge to surrender. The urge to do what the dragon wanted. What if it's right? He shook his head violently, trying to push the thought away. No, I'm not a destroyer. The alarm shrieked again, a mechanical wail that felt like the death knell of the station. The station's systems were completely out of control. There was no getting around it. There were no more repairs, no more stabilizers to fix. The station was collapsing, and Alan knew it wasn't just the physical systems that were falling apart. It was everything. His understanding of what was real, what was possible, what he was capable of. You're already part of it, human. You always were. It's time to stop resisting. The dragon's voice, low, almost soothing, wrapped itself around him. It was like a spell, a web he couldn't break free from. They wanted to control you. But you are the one who holds the power. The power to destroy, to break free from their control. Alan's hands trembled as they rested on the control panel. He could feel it now, the pulse of the station's failing systems beneath his fingertips. It was a rush of energy, chaotic and volatile, like a living thing. But it was also a choice, his choice. The systems were on the brink of collapse, and the station's reactor would be the first to implode. The energy in the air was so thick he could almost taste it, and somewhere deep inside, he knew what he had to do. Do it, Alan. The dragon's voice was a whisper now, urging him on. Release it. Tear it all down. His eyes locked onto the failing reactor status display. The energy spikes were reaching critical levels, and the containment systems were in the final stages of failure. If he didn't intervene, the entire station would be destroyed, along with everyone on board. Or would it? For the first time, Alan felt the weight of the choice before him. He could stop it. He could fix everything. But doing so meant continuing down the path he had been forced onto. The path the dragon had revealed. The path of submission, of obedience to the forces that had shaped him. But there was another path. The dragon had made it clear that Alan had the power to choose. He wasn't a puppet. He wasn't a tool. He wasn't part of their design. He was his own person. You know what you must do. The dragon's words were growing distant now, as though the creature could sense Alan's growing resistance. The station cannot survive. But you can. You are the one who will bring about the change. Alan's mind cleared, the fog lifting as his hand settled over the control panel with newfound resolve. This was his choice, his responsibility. He was the catalyst for something greater, but the choice of whether to embrace that power was his alone. The dragon wanted him to destroy it all. But Alan knew one thing. It was time to take control. With a deep breath, Alan pressed the final sequence of keys, overriding the station's failing protocols. The emergency systems hummed as the last of the power began to reroute, stabilizing what little remained of the reactor's energy grid. The countdown for complete system failure slowed, the panic within Alan's chest subsiding as the station's heartbeat began to steady. The dragon's whispers faded into the distance, swallowed by the sound of the station's repairing systems. The station wasn't finished, but Alan wasn't finished either. The choice had been made. Now, he was in control.